All right, hi Stat 113 people. So we're gonna spend this video talking a little bit about outliers. And so this is a topic that we're not gonna get into that much. We're really just gonna define a few things, make sure we know what each of these terms mean, and then just be aware that it's something you could definitely come across if you were doing a regression analysis on your own, or something to consider when reading the results of someone else's analysis of data. And so to start, we're just going to define an outlier as an observation or any observations that have a large positive or large negative residuals. And so we had a definition of an outlier before when we were just looking at one quantitative variable. And so remember, we made box plots, and we had a particular rule for determining which points are outliers and which points weren't. Those types of rules exist for this as well, but we're not really going to talk about them. Instead, we're just going to be responsible for identifying outliers from a graph. And so to do that, all we really need to remember is what the definition of a residual is. And so if this was our scatter plot with our fitted line, we're just going to make a note that, okay, well, this point, remembering that a residual is the distance from the point down to the line vertically, that point has a very large positive residual. This point has a very large, where large is in quotes because we really just mean very negative, has a very large negative residual. And so both of these points we would classify as outliers. It's interesting at least to think about, in a real data example, what makes these points outliers. So you might dive into the data a little bit further to investigate that. Leverage, we're defining as observations that have either unusually large or unusually small x values. And so the reason why these points are called leverage is that they have the potential to exert a lot of control over the slope and intercept of the regression line. Which I'm just going to abbreviate as they have the potential to exert a lot of control over the fit of the regression line. So these are fairly simple to identify. If you have a scatter plot, then what makes a point a leverage point is if it has an unusually small or an unusually large x value. So both of these would be classified as leverage because this one has an unusually small x value, this one has an unusually large x value. If that was your fitted regression line, note that just because a leverage point isn't, just because the point's leveraged doesn't mean it's an outlier. For example, this point is leveraged, but it's not an outlier because it's pretty close to the fitted line. This point is leveraged, and it is an outlier because it's pretty far from the line and it has a large x value. The last definition that we're going to talk about is influence, which we're just defining as points or observations. So since each point is an observation, those are equivalent, that when removed would result in a very different fitted regression line. So for our example, I'm going to draw a scatter plot with maybe some points like this, and maybe a point down here. And then I'm going to draw one fitted line so that would be the fitted regression line without the point that's starred. And then I'm going to draw a dashed line that's going to represent the regression line that includes the point that's starred. That might look something like that. And so because these two lines are really super different, this point that's starred has a lot of influence. This is important because if a point has a lot of influence, we need to think hard about whether that point belongs in the analysis, if there is a reason to remove it, if we should report both lines, or etc. And so what should be done about outliers that are influential? We're just gonna make a couple notes that they should not be removed without a reason. So just because a point is influential doesn't mean that you should just remove it. And kind of the most important takeaway is that if they are removed, we must report that you removed them. And why. So, and why they were removed. This is really just about data ethics. We shouldn't just be removing observations without reporting that we removed them. That's a little bit dishonest, or, well, it's actually a lot dishonest depending on the context. And if we have a reason to remove it, that's totally fine, but we need to just state somewhere that we removed these 3 points or whatever because blah, 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 blah. All right, so that's about it for these topics. We'll see them pop up a little bit here and there, but otherwise we're not going to delve any deeper into these different definitions of outliers, leverage, and influence.